Good morning, everyone, in-house as well as online. Today is the 31st of October, the year 2021, and we are in the full moon meditation hall in New Hamlet, Plum Village. Today is a very special day. We've changed the schedule to have a talk given by myself and Brother Phap this morning in order to support a 12-day of practice we have together with many friends online, about 1,400 friends online who have committed to come together to practice for the next 12 days. We call it We Are the Earth Retreat, as well as our friends online who are joining us for this Rains Retreat online this year. And our efforts are to practice together to generate peace, joy, understanding, in order to send our energy for the success of COP26. So here we are this morning. So the earth has been a lot on all of our minds, and especially the health of our planet. Many of us are wondering what we can actually do or what we shouldn't do, what to do and what not to do. It's a question in all of our hearts, very pressing, very recently. And there's an urgency to take action. We want to be able to do something. There's fear that we're running out of time. But I think beyond this fear, we also have to take some time to really see what it is that we are trying to protect. And what is our relationship with the earth? What is our true relationship with the planet? What kind of relationship do we have with the earth? I think this is a question that has to accompany the actions that we want to take in order to help the planet. So when we take a breath, for instance, or when we make a step, can we recognize our relationship with the earth? That breath that we make or that step that we take is not possible without the planet, without the atmosphere. So just in a very simple act of breathing or making a step, we can already recognize our relationship with the earth. And sometimes many of us, when we want to connect with Mother Earth, we go into nature or we contemplate our food, the food that we eat, and we see that there's that exchange with Mother Nature. But actually, we also have a relationship with the earth in the bags that we carry, in the shoes that we wear, in the homes that we live in, home or homes that we live in the cars that we drive, and even in the kinds of relationships that we have. All of that says something about our relationship with Mother Earth. And when we look around us, Because sometimes we have an idea, nature versus man-made, man-made versus nature. And sometimes we forget that everything that we see, including the meadow bell here, or this meditation hall that we're sitting in, the clock hanging on our wall, all of it, it comes from Mother Earth. It doesn't grow as naturally as a tree, but it comes from Mother Earth. And for a long time already, we know that we've been borrowing from Mother Earth, borrowing in order to support our way of life. And we're now at a point where I think there's a global awakening that we've borrowed too much. We've borrowed too much. And there's also, some of us were at the TED Countdown Summit in Edinburgh, Scotland, just a few weeks ago. And for me, I see that there's a real global awakening for the need to live within the limits of the biosphere. And there we saw so many leaders, state as well as non-state leaders, really doing their best and struggling to come up with policies or different pathways, coming up with mapping out different policies or mapping out different pathways to help the different sectors in our society to live within the limits of the biosphere. So that is the most pressing action on everyone's mind right now. And in Buddhism, we also have a map to help us to live within the limits of the biosphere. And I think we call that moderation. I'd like to write this term on the board. So the principle of moderation. My Chinese is not so beautiful. It's a very elementary school Chinese. But this means thiệu dục tri túc. It means having few desires and knowing enough. Knowing when we have enough. Having few desires and knowing when we have enough. So the principle of moderation, in Chinese, it would be having few desires and knowing enough. So in Buddhism, we speak about moderation in terms of food, clothing, shelter, and medicine. And as practitioners, we try to live in moderation, meaning that seeing that our food, our shelter, our clothing, the medicines that we have is never too much in excess. Looking into moderation, for me, I see that for our times right now, and also in the past as well, when I'm able to practice moderation, I see there's so many benefits. For instance, I do see that moderation is a form of security. For instance, when I don't want to be number one, or the best at anything, and I just, am okay with who I am. That's also a form of moderation. And suddenly I feel so secure. I'm okay. I don't have to be afraid that I'm not number one, for instance. When we want to when we have ideas competing against our friends or our family being more successful than they are, and having more cars and more homes and things like that. And I feel when I can live in moderation, I also have that form of security. And even here, for instance, sometimes I have a lot of teas or teapots and things like that. And it's interesting how when we start to possess something that we end up wanting to protect it. And whatever it is that we want to protect, we create a bubble of fear. There's also a lot of fear involved. And so when I have less need for less teas or less teapots or something like that, I have less fear in wanting to protect them. I'm also more generous in sharing them. So I'm not afraid of having less, and not afraid of having less. Cultivating that non-fear is a way to cultivate non-fear. A way to cultivate non-fear. And I also see that living in moderation is also an antidote to greed and fear. So not just a way to cultivate non-fear, but it is an antidote to greed and fear. And those of us who have who experience a simple life, we know this. Who embark on living more simply, we know this. The more we're able to let go, and not just in terms of material possessions, but also in terms of ideas, the more non-fear we have. The less fear we have, and the less craving we have. And I think this is, for me, a very concrete expression of love for Mother Earth. So, as individuals, I also have to watch my time today. As individuals or organizations or governments, we can see whether our policies or the pathways that we are opening up are in line with the principle of moderation. We can take a moment to come back to our breathing, enjoy a few breaths, and in the few breaths, you can take a few moments to really recognize our relationship with Mother Earth in the breath that we're taking. So Thay has once said that it's our way of being that has led us into the situation we are in, and it's our way of being that can help us out of this situation. So what can we do? What can we do right now to contribute to change? When I contemplated this question, somehow the insight I came up with is that maybe our willingness to change our way of being could be the greatest contribution that we can offer. Our willingness to change our way of being. And this also means to look deeply into our measures of success, and whether our ideas of success or happiness is in line with the principle of moderation, and also whether our ideas of success and happiness is inclusive of other people, of other nations, of the health of the atmosphere, or of biodiversity on Earth. Our ideas of success or happiness in line with those things. And sometimes we think, right now, it seems many of us believe that bigger is better. Bigger is better. The bigger your company, the more successful. So we try to go for growth. And even in making policies or mapping out different pathways to help us to reduce emissions by half by 2030, we're doing it in such a way that sustains our current way of being, our current measures of success. And I think the challenge is right now for each of us to look deeply into our measures of success. Look deeply into our current way of being, and what is the driving force behind our current way of being. What are the ideas of happiness or success that we have? And whether or not it's in line with moderation and inclusivity. And for me, I know that letting go of an idea, especially an idea that I'm quite passionate about, it's very difficult. And when I am in a position, if I have an idea I'm really passionate about, a way of being that I really am stuck in, especially when it comes to when I'm put in a position where I have to defend this way of being, there's a lot of tension and conflict inside. But as soon as I notice that, as soon as I'm able to let go of this idea, I feel very light. Immediately I feel quite light. I feel really free inside. And on the other hand, at the same time, I also have so much spaciousness to receive new ideas and be open to new ways of being. So concretely, looking into what we can do to contribute to change, I feel looking deeply into our relationship with Mother Earth, looking deeply into our measures of success, and also maybe we can take some time to list out all of the ways in which we are currently living in moderation or not living in moderation, and seeing what we can do about it. In Plum Village, we do live a simple life by certain standards, I would say. But even among our monastics, for instance, every year we have room changing. And even the amount of simplicity that we're living in, sometimes when it comes time to changing rooms, we already see how much we accumulate, and then we have some public space somewhere, the bell tower or some common room, where you see piles and piles of things that the brothers and sisters need to let go of or want to share their excess things that they've accumulated. So sometimes we have a certain idea of what simple living is, but we can also challenge ourselves. Can we live with even less? Can we live with even less? And I think especially for us in the West, in countries that have for a very long time borrowed more than enough from the earth, we have that responsibility to look and see where we can live less, and where we can be more moderate, and how we can share our excesses. And I think, this is our responsibility right now. And of course, we know that climate change is and also the goal to get to net zero by 2050 is a very difficult and complex issue. And because there are so many interlocking pieces. When we heard one of the CEOs speak at the TED conference, he said it was like the chicken or the egg. The consumers want a certain product, and the suppliers have to supply this certain product. So I think each one of us, we are also consumers, but at the same time we are also suppliers. And we can we have the we have the agency, we have the we have the choice to change our way of being in order to break that chicken and egg cycle. As soon as we change our way of being, as soon as we look deeply into our habits, either of consuming or thinking, or look deeply into our measures of success, and as soon as we can redefine them, we can contribute to breaking that egg and chicken, the egg and the chicken cycle, and not be so caught. I will hand the mic over to Brother Phap right now. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Suko Langnyam, for launching us on this adventure. I feel like today is also something like a festival. So many of us are coming together from all over the world to unite our practice, our intention, our hearts and our minds. With the in the spirit of love and wanting to offer something positive to this crisis that we face, the many crises that we face. So I want to see if I can continue to build on what Suko Langnyam offered us. It may be that there is a feeling of profound anxiety. There was a study, 2 studies published recently, one in the Lancet and one in the journal Science, where they asked young people from all over the world how they feel about the climate crisis. And the results are quite shocking. So it turns out that 75% of young people feel that they are living with a constant feeling of anxiety about the climate situation. 75%. And 50% feel that our society is already doomed. 50%. Many of them are choosing not to have children. They've already decided that they cannot bring children into this world. It's alarming. Now, we might think at first that this is a phenomenon which is happening in the wealthy, educated, population, but it's everywhere. It's everywhere, every country. So this study was taken from all around the world, all kinds of people, all different situations. And so it's in our minds, it's in our collective consciousness. So the question I feel we have to ask ourselves as a practitioner is, how can we help? What can we do? And what does it mean to be a practitioner now in this time of crisis? There's something that Thay used to say quite frequently, and every time he said it, mostly I had quite a negative reaction. I apologize, sorry. But Thay would say, a good practitioner should know, or a good practitioner knows, how to generate a feeling of joy or a feeling of happiness. And a good practitioner knows how to take care of a feeling of pain, a painful feeling. And every time I heard Thay say that, I would something would shrivel up inside me, and I just feel like, oh, so I'm not a good practitioner. That means I'm not a good practitioner because, I'm not sure if I know how to do that, or I feel often that I'm not able to do that. And I think I misunderstood Thay's intention. So Thay wasn't saying, if you don't know how to do this, you're a bad practitioner. That's not what Thay was saying. Thay was saying, it's easy. Don't make it so complicated. Thay was saying, all you need to know how to do to be a good practitioner is to know how to generate a feeling of happiness and how to take care of a feeling of pain. So, sometimes we make it so complicated and we think we have to study all kinds of things and read all kinds of things and read more sutras and, learn Sanskrit or something. I mean, that's good too. If you're doing that, please carry on. But maybe it's not so complicated. And I feel like if we know what we can do, then we have an antidote to the feeling of powerlessness. Because a lot of the anxiety, the feeling of being overwhelmed in the face of the crisis, is a sense that there's nothing we can do, or whatever we can do is not enough. So that's what I want to look at today. What can we do? I ask permission to wipe this off. It's okay? Have you written it down? So I would like to take Thay's statement about being a good practitioner and modify it a little bit. So I want to ask you, do you know how to generate a feeling of joy? And if I ask myself that question, the answer is partly yes, partly no. Do you know how to handle a feeling of pain? Partly, sometimes. So it doesn't have to be just yes or no. And we can also ask ourselves, well, if I know how to generate a feeling of joy, do I know, how often do I do it? How often do I remember that I can generate a feeling of joy? Could I do it more? In what situation do I know how to generate a feeling of joy? Because sometimes it's easy, right? You know, if you're with a group of friends and everybody's in a good mood and something lovely is happening, it's not difficult. So the real question is, do I know how to generate a feeling of joy when things are difficult? Or when things are neutral? When I'm feeling restless? When I'm feeling distracted? So these are all practices that we have to look into. And the other question is, do I know how to do it when I'm on my own? And do I know how to do it collectively? Do I know how to help a group to generate a feeling of joy? This should be our task. And this is something that we can discuss. We can share with each other. We can find out. We can learn from each other how to do this. There are so many ways. There are so many wonderful ways. And I'm sure everybody in this room and everybody online has ways to do this. And we need to learn from each other. We need to share with each other. So, I want to ask two more questions. Do you know how to recognize when you are avoiding a painful feeling? And do you know yes, how to recognize when you are underestimating a feeling of joy? So why do I ask these questions? Do we know how to recognize when we are avoiding a painful feeling? This has something to do with, do we know how to handle a painful feeling? Because we can't handle it, we can't transform it until we recognize it. And very often, we need to do that first step of accepting, of recognizing, right now, I am running from a painful feeling. Right now, I am feeling like I need to cover up this painful feeling. I need to avoid this painful feeling. So that has to be the first step. Recognizing, in this moment, yes, I am trying not to feel this sense of dread, this sense of anxiety, this sense of doom, this sense of it's too late. We can't do anything. We are powerless. And then the final question, do I know how to recognize when I'm underestimating the power of a feeling of joy? For many years, I felt like in my approach to the practice, I was very focused on the suffering. And whenever Thay spoke about generating a feeling of joy or being in touch with the wonders of life, I was kind of like, yeah, that's great, sounds good, but what about the suffering? Tell me about the suffering. How do we deal with that? And I didn't understand that generating a feeling of joy, being in touch with the wonders of life, is handling suffering. That is how to handle a feeling of pain. It's not something separate, it's not something different. It is the practice of handling suffering. And so I need to recognize that I may be underestimating the power of well-being, of joy, of simple happiness, to respond to the situation we are in, globally, collectively. It may feel in my mind that just generating a feeling of joy is kind of like, you could almost think it's spiritual bypassing. You could almost think it's somehow false. Oh, you can't just be happy. You have to know how bad things are. If you're just happy, that's naive. It's unrealistic. Maybe even foolish. So we need to be attentive to notice if we have that tendency. And to understand the connection between our capacity to generate feelings of joy and our ability to stand tall in the face of suffering. Not to be afraid. To be able to welcome it. To be able to embrace it. And generating the feeling of joy comes first. The Buddha was very clear in the 16 exercises of mindful breathing. Exercise 5 and exercise 6. Generating a feeling of joy, generating a feeling of happiness first, before getting in touch with a feeling of pain. And there's a reason. It's because when we do that, we create an environment where the feeling of pain can be held, can be embraced, where it doesn't overwhelm us. So this is a crucial skill for us to master. And what is the connection between this and our global situation? We know that we have to reduce our emissions. We know we have to stop degrading our biosphere. We have to stop polluting the waters, the land, the air. We have to stop cutting the trees and filling the oceans with plastic and toxic waste. This, taken together, we call mitigation. Mitigating the damage that we're doing, reducing the damage, the harm that we're causing. We know that this is an essential component of getting through this. The second part of the solution that we hear a lot about is adaptation. We know that as the climate becomes more unstable, we will have more extreme weather events. It will be bigger extremes of temperature, heat waves that we're not accustomed to, that we're not ready for, and extreme storms, wind, rain, things that our infrastructure is not designed to handle. So this is known as adaptation. Adapting our infrastructure, that means our houses, our cities, our modes of transportation, everything, to be able to deal with a more unstable climate. So, we know that these are the keys: mitigation, adaptation. But what may happen for us as practitioners is the feeling that, well, there's not much maybe that we can do about that, because that has to happen at a very large scale. It has to be changes in policy, changes in our economic system, changes in the way we invest, the way the markets invest large sums of capital. The businesses have to change, our whole economic system has to change, our politics has to change. And it may feel like it's hard to know what we can do about that. But what I want to point out is that both of those things, the mitigation, reducing the emissions, reducing the pollution and the damage, the adaptation, all of that is going to be done by people, by human beings. And what we know is that 75% of young people are already feeling overwhelmed. 50% already feel that we are doomed. So how are those people going to engage in the necessary mitigation and adaptation? We know quite a lot about our nervous system. We know that when we feel threatened, when we feel overwhelmed by a situation, when we feel powerless in the face of forces that we don't feel like we can change, what happens is that we tend to freeze. We shut down. Maybe first we try to fight or we try to run, it's the fight or flight reflex, but very quickly when we're overwhelmed, when we are facing forces that are bigger than us, we freeze, we shut down. There is a kind of paralysis, psychological paralysis, a feeling of I can't do anything, and that very quickly becomes, I don't want to think about it. It's overwhelming. It can be denial. It's not that bad. It can't be that bad. If it was that bad, we would have stopped already. Yeah, that's really, that's what happens when we procrastinate. And we are in a moment of collective procrastination. We're just carrying on, business as usual, mostly. There is a lot of transformation, but we know it's not enough. We know it's not happening fast enough. And it may be because of the emotions that we are having to deal with and maybe don't know how to deal with. So that's where we come in. That's where the Sangha can act. Because we know how to do this. And we know how to do this. Even if only a little bit. Maybe we're still learning. But actually, we have a lot of experience already. Whatever experience we have in our own personal journey as a practitioner, of transforming our suffering, of accepting our suffering, facing it, meeting it, learning how not to run from it, learning how not to deny it, learning how to be gentle with it, learning how to embrace it, learning how to create a foundation of joy and well-being so that it can soften and transform. Whatever experience we have of that is immediately relevant to our global situation. It is the answer. It is what we can do. And it is so needed right now. Think of those young people, 75% of them feeling overwhelmed already. Who is going to help them? Who is going to help them to learn how to handle those feelings of pain? how to generate those feelings of joy that they need so much, how to stop denying the pain, how to allow it to be there, how not to underestimate the power of joy, of well-being. It's us. We have to do that. That, I believe, is our task. And it's so wonderful because actually we already know what to do. We already have so much experience. It's like, often faced with these challenges, what we hear is, we have the technology already. We know what to do. We have all the technology we need. Well, so do we. We have the technology. We have the spiritual technology. And when I get in touch with these feelings of being overwhelmed, also by the scale of the problem, by the immensity of the suffering that we already face and that is likely to be coming, I try to remind myself that the moment for me to act is now. With that feeling. That's where I have to do the work. That's where I can engage. I don't have to wait to go on a protest. I don't have to wait to engage in, for the time when I can vote. Of course, I have to do those things as well, but I can act now, already, in this moment, with this feeling. And it's immediately connected to the global situation. Because we know that we are the earth. The earth is not outside of us. Everybody knows Thay's poem, "Please call me by my true names." And I think we like to focus on the kind of the positive side of that. We are the. I'm actually thinking of there's an extension of Thay's poem which you can find in the 3 earth touchings. It's quite similar. Very beautiful text. Maybe I'll just read it to you. I am one with the wonderful pattern of life that radiates out in all directions. I see the close connection between myself and others, how we share happiness and suffering. I am one with those who were born disabled, or who have become disabled because of war, accident, or illness. I am one with those who are caught in a situation of war or oppression. I am one with those who find no happiness in family life, who have no roots and no peace of mind, who are hungry for understanding and love, and who are looking for something beautiful, wholesome, and true to embrace and to believe in. I am someone at the point of death, who is very afraid and does not know what is going to happen. I am a child who lives in a place where there is miserable poverty and disease, whose legs and arms are like sticks, and who has no future. I am also the manufacturer of bombs that are sold to poor countries. I am the frog swimming in the pond, and I am also the snake who needs the body of the frog to nourish its own body. I am the caterpillar or the ant that the bird is looking for to eat, and I am also the bird that is looking for the caterpillar or the ant. I am the forest that is being cut down. I am the rivers and the air that are being polluted. And I am also the person who cuts down the forest and pollutes the rivers and the air. I see myself in all species, and I see all species in me. I am one with the great beings who have realized the truth of no birth and no death, and are able to look at the forms of birth and death, happiness and suffering, with calm eyes. I am one with those people who can be found a little bit everywhere, who have sufficient peace of mind, understanding and love, are able to touch what is wonderful, nourishing and healing, who also have the capacity to embrace the world with a heart of love and arms of caring action. I am someone who has enough peace, joy and freedom, and is able to offer fearlessness and joy to living beings around themselves. I see that I am not lonely and cut off. The love and the happiness of great beings on this planet help me not to sink in despair. They help me to live my life in a meaningful way with true peace and happiness. I see them all in me, and I see myself in all of them. I want to ask you, are you a victim of climate change? Maybe if we are practitioners, we have a feeling that, no, I don't behave as a victim. I know as a practitioner, I see with the eyes of interbeing and I'm not a victim. But what happens when we think of the giant corporations that have caused so much harm, the oil companies that have lied and covered up the science, that have paid millions or maybe billions in lobbying to delay the change that we need to make? We have to be very careful and observe what happens in our minds and in our hearts. If we start to see them as the enemy, as the ones who are to blame, the moment we do that, we become victims. And Thay said something very challenging. He said, as a practitioner, you do not have the right to be a victim. Very difficult. We need to be very attentive to notice when we slip into that mode of thinking, that mode of relating to the situation. It's also connected to powerlessness. Whenever we feel helpless in the face of these crises, that's already being a victim. So we have to be very careful to recognize that and to know how to handle that. Because being a victim is a feeling of pain. So, as a good practitioner, what do? We know how to handle a feeling of pain. We know how to handle being a victim, how to transform it. And that's why I wanted to read this text, because I think when we think of interbeing, we love to contemplate and to think of our interbeing with the trees. The trees are beautiful, noble, majestic. But how often do we contemplate our interbeing with the ones who cut the trees down? How often do we contemplate our interbeing with those who pollute the oceans and the rivers? How often do we see that they are in us and we are in them and we are part of the same system of extraction and exploitation, and that we have benefited from it, we have profited from it? But I don't say that to make us feel bad or to make us feel guilty. On the contrary. Because what it means, if they are in us and we are in them, it means that when we transform, they transform. That is our power. That is our agency. That is why we are not powerless. That is why we can do something. Do we really think that our feelings are our feelings only? Do you think your feelings stay in here? In here? They don't leak? I once did this exercise with a group of friends. I asked them to make pairs. And then one member of the pair has to share with the other the most inspiring, wonderful, joyful thing that has happened to them in the last week. And the task of the one who listens is to stay completely indifferent, not to feel anything. So they have to sit there completely blank, whilst the other person is sharing the most amazing, wonderful thing that has ever happened to them. And they have to try and not feel anything. And then they switch around. And the result is very clear. It's impossible. You can't. As soon as somebody starts sharing their joy, their inspiration, their passion, you feel it. You can't not feel it. It's because the feeling is not theirs. It doesn't end here at your skin. Our feelings are not ours. So when we generate a feeling of joy, it is not just for us. It has no edge. It has no boundary. It transforms the world. It is not something small. It is not trivial. And it is not spiritual bypassing. It is a powerful, courageous act. When we generate a feeling of joy, knowing what we know, knowing how bad the situation is, that is a courageous act. That is an act of resistance. And we need to do that individually and collectively. And share with each other and learn. Find new ways. Inspire each other. And we could tell you stories about being in Edinburgh, with all of these climate activists and scientists, people from the world of business, of politics. They could feel it. Sometimes they would come up to us and say, I don't know what you're doing, but please keep doing it, because every time I see you, I feel better. And we'd be like, okay, sure. Well, I'm not sure what we were doing either, but we're just walking around mindfully, taking care of our feelings, taking care when we feel overwhelmed, supporting each other as a little mini Sangha of 4, taking care of each other. And some of them were very struck by that. They're like, how you move as a group is amazing. You seem to flow, and I can't tell who's in charge and who's, you're just a body. So we have a lot of powerful technology. We should not underestimate it. And the world needs it right now. And they are people are very sensitive to it. Actually, they pick it up right away. It touches them. And in fact, it's maybe because of that, our presence in Edinburgh, that now we have been invited to the COP26. So we will be there. Our Sangha will be there. In fact, this afternoon I have to leave to go to Bordeaux to travel to Glasgow. And Thay Phap Dung will meet me there in Glasgow. But it's not about me and it's not about Thay Phap Dung, it's about us being there as a Sangha. So in the light of interbeing, we are just the tip of the branch. And we rely completely on the tree and the roots. And that is all of us. And that's the same for each one of us. Before I came in to the hall, Thay Min Hee offered me this beautiful leaf. And it's wonderful to be a leaf. But don't be just the leaf. Be the branch. Be the tree. Be the roots. And don't be just the tree, but be the forest. And don't be just the forest, but be the earth. If you feel powerless, if you feel overwhelmed, if you feel disconnected, we have to light up the insight of interbeing in our hearts. We have to activate it again and again and again. And this gives us a bigger space, a vast space to hold our pain with tenderness, with love, with the love of Mother Earth, to hold it and to transform it. And we can expand in time as well as space. We become the earth, but we also become the whole lineage of our ancestors, all of life. And it doesn't make us less ourselves. It makes us more of ourselves, because that's what we really are. We are vast. And we contain multitudes. So when we go to Glasgow, we go as a Sangha. We go as a multitude. And I want to share that with you because we will depend on that, being there. We will depend on your practice during these 12 days. And the brothers and sisters have created a wonderful program for these 12 days for us to collect and focus our energy. And so we have agency, we have something to do. And it's crucial. It's crucial because all of the people there, they're just people. And they all have feelings. They're all struggling with the feeling of dread, the feeling of being overwhelmed, the feeling of it's too late. And we can help. We know how to help. So part of the skill, the art of handling a feeling of pain and generating a feeling of joy is to notice what kind of story are we telling in our mind about the suffering. Are we telling the story that puts us in the role of a victim? Are we telling a story that makes somebody else the culprit? Are we telling a story of it's too late, we're doomed? Even when I reported the 2 studies that I mentioned, 75% of young people are feeling overwhelmed with anxiety. 50% of people are feeling that our society is already doomed. Well, that's only one way to tell that story. And I want to propose another way. 25% of young people are not feeling overwhelmed. Wow. 50% do not feel that we are doomed. Wow. And where are we in that number? Because sometimes maybe we're in the 75%, sometimes we're in the 25%. Every day, every time those feelings come up, we can move from one to the other. We know how to handle those feelings. We know exactly what to do. And when we forget, we have our brothers and sisters to help us, to remind us. Now maybe 25% doesn't sound like enough, but you'd be surprised. There have been a lot of studies done on social change, on transformation. And what they tell us is that the critical mass needed for collective social transformation to take place is what? Between 5 and 25%. So when I say 25% of young people are not feeling overwhelmed by climate anxiety, that means it's enough already, more than enough. And when we look at how we relate to our own suffering, what I noticed many, many times, and I was speaking with a brother yesterday about this, who came to me as his mentor. I still find it quite funny that I'm a mentor, but anyway. And he wanted to share with me how his practice is going and something he feels he's struggling with. And what I reflected to him was, actually from what I hear, the transformation has already happened. I can hear that you've understood, like your mindfulness has grown to the point where you can hold this. You're already doing everything you need to do. But what hasn't changed is the story. And that is very, very often the case. That the transformation has already taken place. We've already transformed. But we stay with the old story. And we keep falling back into it. So we need to have the courage to recognize the good in us, in the world, to recognize the change that is already happening. And we need to tell those stories. That's how we transform the suffering. That's how we generate a feeling of joy. The stories we tell matter. If you're a journalist, if you're a filmmaker, if you're a songwriter, you have to tell these stories. They're better stories. How often do we remind ourselves of the power of social transformation in the past? I heard something very interesting. There's a young climate activist in Germany, whose name I may now struggle to remember, Neubauer. Brother Nghiem, do you remember? Louisa, thank you. Louisa Neubauer. She said something wonderful. She said, when we, I have to paraphrase, I don't remember exactly, but for us to think that we cannot change the situation now is arrogant with regard to the social transformation in the past. Does that make sense? So she says, when we feel that we can't change, that it's too big, that we don't have enough people, that the corporations and the governments are too slow to transform, it is arrogant in regard to the power of social transformation in the past. We underestimate how much we have been able to transform just with social movements, civil disobedience, with peace. So we need to study that as well, the movements of the past, and tell those stories and remind ourselves how powerful we really are. And she told a wonderful story, a little example. She said and this is also an example of how the story, the narrative, may have already changed. And we need to get up to speed with the new narrative. She says now, in the recent German elections, every single political party had as part of its platform a commitment to no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius of temperature increase. Every party, from the left to the right. And that's the first time that has ever happened. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, that was the struggle. It was a struggle even to get people to accept that there is climate change, that we need to do something about it, that we need to limit the increase in temperatures to 1.5 degrees. And who made that change happen? To a large extent, it is the young climate activists. And the way they did it in Germany, she said they selected the party that they thought would be the easiest to get to move and to put this on their, their commitments. And that was the Green Party. But surprisingly, the Green Party had not made that commitment to, we will limit temperature increase to 1.5 degrees. So what did they do? They went to their offices, they occupied the offices of the Green Party. They occupied a forest, which the Green Party was going to cut down. And they said, we will not move until you make this commitment. And then they did. And then all the other parties see, well, the Greens are getting quite popular actually in Germany. And it seems like actually everybody, responds to this message of 1.5. So maybe we have to do it too. And suddenly, everybody makes that commitment. And the story changes. And that's just a handful of young people with the creativity, the heart, the determination to act. And we can support them. We may already be in touch with many of them, but they will face many challenges, many difficulties, particularly with handling the strong emotions. And they asked us in Edinburgh to help them with that, to teach them how to handle strong emotions. So that's why we each have to ask ourselves, do we know how to do it? How often do we do it? Do we know how to do it when it's hard to do it? Do we know how to share it with somebody else? Do we know how to help somebody else when they are overwhelmed by a strong emotion? This has to be a burning question for us. It is of critical importance. And the wonderful thing is that every part of our practice is connected to that, because the main ingredient that allows us to do any of this is mindfulness, is the degree to which we are aware of what is going on inside and around us. And that is something that we can cultivate at any moment. So that's why every single step that we can take and remember to be aware of it is an immediate and direct contribution to the planetary crisis that we face. Every time we can remember to be aware of the feeling of our breath coming into our body, going out, we are increasing our degree of freedom in the face of our own suffering. We are increasing our capacity to see what is going on in our minds and to remember to generate joy. And that is directly linked to the situation that we face. What is this practice? These 4 questions. This is trauma therapy. This is what you have to do when you're overwhelmed, when you're frozen, when your nervous system is overwhelmed by pain. This is what we have to learn how to do. And we have to do it at scale. Because everybody is going to need this. We know that. We know the kind of suffering that we already face and what is going to come in the next few decades. It's only going to be needed more. And the amazing thing about our practice is that, in a sense, no matter what happens, this is always the appropriate response. Generate mindfulness. Cultivate the freedom to recognize and embrace our feelings. The skill, the art of generating a feeling of happiness. It's amazing. It's transferable to every kind of suffering. So that's why it's so simple. It's all we need to know how to do. And suddenly we are equipped in every single situation to respond, to act, to help, to serve. We have something to offer. But we need to make sure, do we have something to offer? Have we mastered it? Can we learn from each other? Can we stay inspired? These 4 questions, in a sense, is also the practice of right diligence. Right? You remember right diligence? One of the elements of the Noble Eightfold Path. How does it go? When a positive mental formation is not present, what do? Bring it up. What's that? Generating a feeling of joy. Joy could be compassion, peace, stillness, generosity, kindness. When a positive mental formation is absent, we know how to bring it up. We bring it up. Right? When a negative mental formation is present, what do? We help it to go back to sleep. We take care of it. We know how to embrace it. Handling a feeling of pain. When a positive mental formation is not present, do we know when a positive mental formation is already present, do we know how to keep it, how to maintain it, how to let it stay for a long time? Do we recognize how important it is? Have we underestimated the power of our joy, of our well-being? And when a negative mental formation is not present, do we know how to avoid watering the seeds that bring it up? That's not quite the same as this, but anyway, it's still, this is the skills, these are the skills that we need. And what is the result of these skills when we're able to do this? When we have more well-being, then we don't need as much. It's exactly like what Sukho Langnim was saying. Then we can live with less. Because we're already happy. We're already okay. We're already satisfied. So this is crucial for this path of moderation that we want to demonstrate and we want to share with the world. The ability to handle our emotions is the precondition for being able to live a simple life. It's what makes it possible. Because we know we have enough, we don't need any more. And so, my sense is that we we need an army. A peaceful army with no weapons. An army of practitioners. We can all be training and we will all be called to stand. We will be called to help, to serve. Every time you meet a feeling of pain in yourself, you are being called. Every time you meet a feeling of pain in somebody else, you are being called. And our collective capacity to do these things, to handle the pain, to generate the joy, these are the conditions for us to be able to do what we have to do as a whole society to face the challenge that we are in. We will not mitigate, we will not adapt if we are frozen, if we are paralyzed, if we are overwhelmed. So we have something to do. And the wonderful thing is that it's easy. We are already doing it. And we will be there in Glasgow with everybody. And we will be channeling the mindfulness, the joy, the love, the insight of the whole Sangha. Yeah. So, thank you.